I'm Vance Bastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 10 Episode 25 interview. We'll be talking with C. Travis Rice and discussing his Sapphire Cove 5 novel, Party of Three. So if you don't know our guest, let me introduce him. Christopher Rice is the recipient of the Lambda Literary Award. He is the Amazon Charts and New York Times best-selling author of A Density of Souls, Bone Music, Blood Echo, and Blood Victory in the Burning Girl series, and Bram Stoker Award finalists Heaven's Rise and The Vines. An executive producer for television, he also penned two novels with his mother, Anne Rice, Ramses the Damned, The Passion of Cleopatra, and Ramses the Damned, The Reign of Osiris. Together with his best friend and producing partner, New York Times bestselling novelist Eric Shaw Quinn, Christopher runs the production company Dinner Partners. Among other projects, they produce the podcast The Video Network TDPS, which can be found at www.thedinnerpartyshow.com. He lives in West Hollywood, California, and writes tales of romance between men under the pseudonym C. Travis Rice, and that's what we're here to discuss today. Christopher, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. And I feel like you covered everything in that bio. So we can just talk about, I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Food choices, yeah, what
So
sparkling
how
or
about that
flat.
Sinners movie now?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to.
Oh,
Yeah,
must,
yeah,
must.
yeah.
As soon as we're
Um,
done, just push play.
I as soon as I'm done with you guys, I've got a couple more interviews.
Oh, okay,
So as soon as I'm done with all those, and
okay,
I've been to the gym, then we'll
right.
push play.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you for having me back. This is like my third appearance, I
It
think, on
is,
the
yeah.
podcast. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we jumped in
You're
on, was
almost a
it?
co-host.
Absolutely. So I want a cut of your ad revenue. Let's talk about
Okay.
that after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. That
No.
means you get 1 penny. I get one.
I know, right? Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I this is a novella in this universe. So this is a smaller, spicy story. I like to
Okay.
say it's a good intro for people who want to sort of dip their toe in the smutty waters of Sapphire Cove.
Hmm.
Um, there is an appearance by two of the regular recurring characters from the main series, but they just sort of introduced this story. I have some friends, some bookstagrammers who I enjoy, who enjoy my work, who have lovingly compared it to a late night cable TV construction where it's like, so my friend Buckley rented one of the villa suites this weekend. Do you want to hear what he got up to? And then it's like, and anyway, but yeah, it is. This series has been, I never thought I'd write this series, and I probably never would have if I hadn't been locked down during COVID like everybody else.
Hmm.
And I didn't, I thought maybe three novels, that was my plan. And we're now up to four novels and this novella. And I'm working on what may be the last novel in the series now, which is Jonas's story,
Ooh.
which I always saw as the sort of end point. I shouldn't say I didn't always see it. I did actually. When I saw it as three books, I thought Jonas would be the last book. And then I realized I had a story that came out of nowhere that became book three. I had a
Gotcha.
scene really that came out of nowhere. I had with this face off between these two characters and this unbelievably soap operatic conflict between them, which I won't spoil, which became Sapphire Storm. And I also realized that Logan's best friend, Logan was one of the heroes of the first book, that was more than comic relief and he deserved his own love story as well. And that was Donnie's book. So anyway, this is the Sweet Secrets novellas, as they're called. They're a sub-series, if that makes sense. They're sort of, I was saying in another interview recently, I never was that interested in writing a series set at a hotel that was about the guests. I didn't want to do a White Lotus thing.
Hmm.
I wrote the first book before White Lotus aired, but this is way more earnest, way more romantic than that show is. And so the staff was more interesting to me than the guests were. But these novellas are about the guests. It's like they have a weekend of spice and romance in their lavish suite that changes their lives forever.
Interesting. So, what do folks need to know about the setting and the primary characters to dive into this novella?
Well, the primary characters, you don't really need to know anything. I think
Okay.
you meet them for the first time. The thing that I think the intro will satisfy, I think, readers of the series. And I think if you haven't read the series and you get to that intro and you think I need to know more about these two, you really don't, because they're just there to introduce Buckley, Jeff, and Mateo. I think that something that people say about the series a lot, and I take it as a compliment, is that the writing style is different from a lot of romance right now. I don't write first person. I don't particularly care for it myself.
Mhm.
As a reader, I don't care for it. I like the cinematic, um, atmospheric, immersive nature of third person voice better. That doesn't mean you aren't in their heads and chapters don't have individual points of view. It's just a different style. And I did have this one guy, a reviewer said, this reminds me of the romance books my mother used to read. It's like,
Aw.
Well,
I
there
don't
you
know if
go.
they had quite that much rimming in them, frankly, but okay. But it was a compliment about the style, I
Mhm.
think. It was, and so, but like what people need to know is like I was romance, and I don't know if you guys are big romance readers. I think the gay romance thing has started to gather steam over the past, I don't know, since 2014 is when I first started really paying attention to it.
Well, my
Right.
my first exploration into it, it was at 16, reading Gordon Merrick, which was like
Oh
the
yeah,
beginning of all
that's
gay romance. You know.
yeah. And would you, okay, so like I have this is I have not read Gordon Merrick, but I own like the whole library and it's always on my TBR. Do they end happily or do
Yeah, actually they do. It's rather interesting. His prose is very flowery, but it's set in the 20s when people spoke differently. So
hmm
when you start to go through it, you get the My Dear Boy and all of that
hmm
stuff. So as long as you're like okay with Great Gatsby kind of, aesthetic, then yeah. I mean it's definitely got a bittersweet happiness,
hmm
but it's I think it's great. I think it definitely challenged me as a 16. I always say John Ritchie was for my lust and Gordon Merrick was for my heart. Those are my two
Yeah.
literary,
Uh-huh.
along with yourself, because Density of Souls is one of my DIBs.
Thank you.
So, but yeah,
That was
it's
for your therapy. That
yeah, right,
Desert
right.
of Souls was for you and your therapist, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's yeah, yeah, I would say that you would probably like him because it is a challenge because they go through a lot and it's several books where you're with the two main characters of Charlie and Peter. So
Well, and I love it. I'm okay if it doesn't end happily. I think the romance reading community is not. In order to have
yeah.
membership, they're really strict. So they'll disqualify a lot. Like Wuthering Heights, people will try to promote that as a classic romance, and the romance fans will be like, "No, no, it is not." It's also really difficult. I read it. I enjoyed it, but I was like, I don't know how anyone would call this a romance novel, a dark, tragic love story. But I think he does stand out as a name who was apart from the usual tragic stories that we were fed as young queer people
Hmm.
Mhm.
or that we needed to tell as young queer people. I don't want to belittle those writers, but there were not books like this when I was
No.
coming out. I think there were beginning to be, but they were usually comedies. Like there were um they were not necessarily about finding love. They were about moving to the big city, finding other gays, having
Mhm.
a good time, finding your place in a community. They weren't necessarily always about you find the one for you, or in this case, the two for you. Um, and I think that's been an exciting thing to develop. I think we as queer men have been a little late to the game.
Yeah.
And I don't think, like it's been a controversial talking point that so many of the writers of books like these are women. And, romance
Well,
fiction
I
in
think
general is,
don't you think AIDS had a real
yes,
big impact that we lost a whole section of men who probably would have evolved that Gordon Merrick baton handoff. You had
yes.
Holleran, you had all the other ones who wrote things about us, but I think because of the AIDS epidemic, it really kind of cleavered what could have been.
Absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. In fact, there's a wonderful romance podcast called Fated Mates, which I'm a regular guest on with Sarah McLean and Jen Prokop, and they had an interview with Vincent Verga. Have you ever heard of him? He
Mm-mm.
wrote a novel called Gaywick, which was a big gothic gay romance, late 70s, I believe,
Oh, okay.
maybe even the early 80s. Popular, got a readership. He gave in the interview, he talks about big authors who had read the book and reached out to him, and then AIDS happened. And I really think, just as you described, if it hadn't happened, we would have moved in that direction. But everything that we wrote and needed to write was almost like a call to political action,
Yeah, yeah,
you
Right.
know,
exactly.
or you had famous gay
We had bigger
writers.
fish to fry.
Yeah, are they, Andrew Sullivan, not an uncontroversial person, don't necessarily agree with all of his politics, but he has some beautiful essay writing about this time. And he said, I had to write these books because I thought I was going. He was HIV positive and the protease inhibitors hadn't happened yet. And he was like, this is this is it. This is my swan song. So I got to get this all on paper. So there was that general tone, I think, to a lot of the fiction that they were recording a world that might fall, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and to your point also about romance being more popular recently, there's sort of this unofficial dividing line of pre-Glee and post-Glee, in
Mm.
that the show Glee suddenly allowed our culture and our stories to be mainstream.
Hmm. I
Eh,
absolutely agree. I was shocked when Glee was on the air and I went home to visit my Dallas relatives who are lovely people, but I don't exactly talk about Party of Three with them.
right.
Really?
And
No, no reading circles?
we don't have it. I don't know if they've ever read these books. So, but all their kids were like couldn't come to dinner because they were watching Glee. And I said at the table, I was like, "This is your kids are watching. This is the show that all of my gay friends are watching in West Hollywood." And it was like, and they were like, I don't know how they felt about it because aspects of the show were so explicit. But yeah, that is a big dividing line. I used to think Ellen was the dividing line, Ellen
Yep.
coming out, but it was a dividing line that didn't pave the way for this level of sexual
Right.
explicitness and romance writing. And it was different. It was just we went from being only side characters and AIDS victims to being better side characters. Like that, I guess that's how it felt, you
Well, I
know.
think
Hmm.
there was a progression. You had the Ellen thing, but then that crashed and burned right after it happened. And then you had Will and Grace, which I think was the
Yes.
next baton handoff. And
Right.
then we became funny. And
Yeah.
then we became, the adjacent to our straight girlfriend counterparts, and we had a shared universe. And then, so I think there were steps along the way that
Yeah.
now have progressed to where we have stories that have a lot of queer emphasized relationships
Hmm.
out in front. I mean, you can go back to Armstead Maupin with Tales of the City. It had a
Oh yeah.
resurgence in
Hmm.
2019. So,
That was great.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you also like remember how hard it was to find Tales of the City? Like it aired on public television, great controversy, and then you had to go out and find the discs or the tapes or whatever it
Hmm.
was. And I
Hmm.
remember not being able to. You still can't stream the second and third Laura, the earlier ones. You can
Hmm.
you can get the first one, I think is on Netflix, and you can get the reboot. Well, not the reboot. It was actually the final one, which I quite loved.
Right.
But yeah, it was interesting. Eric Shaw Quinn is my best friend, and we do a podcast over at the dinner party show called Christopher and Eric. So, what it's going to be about, anybody knows. We looked back at because we watched Mid-Century Modern. Did you guys watch that
Oh,
on
yeah.
Hulu?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah. And we
Such a
looked
change
back.
from fellow travelers.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. But like we looked at sitcom representation. We looked at
Mhm.
an episode of The Golden Girls where Blanche's gay brother showed up, and we
Yep.
looked at an episode of Designing Women where Tony Goldwyn was dying of AIDS and wanted the women to plan his funeral. And we looked at how those episodes compared to Mid-Century Modern. But the one that Eric brought up, which I don't know if we could find it, was Soap. Do you ever hear of the old
Yeah, oh, yeah, I
sitcom
have.
Soap?
I have the whole series. Yeah.
Yeah. They wouldn't, Eric was living in South Carolina and they wouldn't air it.
Oh,
He
yeah.
could not see it in South Carolina because Billy Crystal played a gay character. So,
Huh.
it was interesting. And I'll say just a last note on the mid-century modern is I saw the response to that show as generational for the first time. Like I saw younger gays on Instagram like, and older gays were like, it's about us.
Right, right.
It's about
The
bitter
whole thing is
middle-aged gays. Yes.
wait, children, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
You all have a seat. You'll live in Palm Springs someday. Like, yeah,
It's
it
where
was
we go.
fun. Exactly.
Hey, I go there 2 weeks out of the year.
Yeah. Y-
So, bringing this back to your book,
Yes.
what should people know about Buckley, Mateo, and Jeff? I mean, you hinted at their relationship.
Well, you should know that this book is for mature audiences, and you should maybe not read it on the treadmill at the gym if you tend to be very reactive. This book is very spicy. I think this you trap not trap, but you put three men who are wildly attracted to each other in a hotel room for a weekend at Sapphire Cove, and you're going to get a book like this. I think the challenge of it as a writer, and it'll be up to the readers to decide if it works, is how do you propel a story with those kinds of I don't want to call them limitations, but givens,
Parameters.
right? Parameters. Like it's almost like writing a one act play in which everybody's banging all the time. It's like, but they're exploring. I love this is my thing, and I think this is my kind of. It's not a kink necessarily, but it is, or maybe a microtrope. That's becoming an increasingly popular term with the romance crowd. A microtrope, where it's not fake dating. It's we're just gonna hook up, and it's gonna be we're gonna see what happens, and it's gonna be casual, and then they fall in love, and they have to deal with it because I think that is a realistic portrayal of a lot of queer men. Like I think we think we're the ones who can just bang them and leave them, but we often get tangled up in complicated feelings,
Right. Right.
unexpectedly. And those feelings don't always materialize the way they do in a romance novel. They don't always end satisfyingly, but that's something that I can do on the page here.
Well, I also think that, I've often tried to promote that we as queer men who write this kind of stuff, I think we need to say it's queer romance, not romance. I
Mm,
think we need to separate ourselves from the women who write those things. But I think gay men have other parts of romance to tell, which are more closer to the bone.
mm.
For
I think I have moments of where I call it a gay romance, like because
Mhm.
I'm a gay man, and if the couple
yeah,
is gay, if it's a gay couple, I think that where I stepped back from that was when one of the heroes was bisexual. I called it a queer romance because I wanted to sort of not erase the full spectrum of his identity. And I know that's an issue for a lot of people. But
Mhm.
I think you're right. I think that the reason I liked in the beginning was that it recognized the other side of it that you were talking about. It was a way of saying or alluding to the fact that I'm not necessarily a member of this community, but I'm writing about this community. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm a gay person writing a gay romance when I'm not. And I thought it was a respectful way of doing it. But I think you're right. I think we should own the label in the ways that feel right for us.
right. Well, and I think, by saying something along the lines of queer romance, we're more inclusive, that it can include trans men, it can include
Yeah.
non-binaries, it can include, and I think also the queer label allows us to have bittersweet endings, not so happy endings, but maybe an ending of you've learned something about yourself. So the self-love kind of gets promoted, and that is the happy ending. You found something out about yourself as a character. So I think we have ways that we can tell those happy stories that aren't necessarily just walk into the sunset hand in hand kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah. It's about, I'm thinking of all the people on the internet who will come for you saying
oh,
your
they've
book
come
didn't
for
have a
me.
happy
They've
ending.
come for me time and time again, and I'm like, child, bring it. I used to go to school board meetings when I was 12 and defend shit, so trust me.
Wow.
Bring
Do
it,
we
go
have
ahead.
video of that? I
Oh,
want to see
I wish
it.
we did, man.
I
That was
wish we
back in
Yeah.
the
did. Yeah.
early.
We could
That was
use
back
you
in the
now.
70s.
We could use you now at some of these school board meetings, I tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got words to say about a lot of those.
Yeah.
So, is there anything about Party of Three you want audiences to know that we didn't think to ask?
No, I think we covered it. I think it's one of those things where I want people to go and like with a book like this, they need to know that it's about a throuple. It's what they
Mhm.
call a menage. It's what they call an MMM,
Yeah,
which I
Mhm.
right,
love.
right, right.
Right. You need to know that. That's going to be the story. I think I don't put a lot of trigger warnings at the beginning of the book, but I usually tell people there is a letter to readers on the Visit Sapphire Cove website that goes into some detail. I don't want to put spoilery trigger warnings. I'm still a suspense
Right.
novelist at heart, and so I don't want to give it all away up front for people who don't want that information. But if people do need it, it's there on visitsapphire.cove.com. And I think, there's another novel coming. This has been quite a busy year for me. We didn't touch on it, but Eric Shaw Quinn and I are hosting a lavish celebration of life for my mother in New Orleans on November 1st of
Oh,
this year.
Oh,
And
love that.
tickets go on sale July 11th. I think this will air before July 11th, so I can say that.
Yeah.
But AnnRice.com has all the information. But this is a major production that we are putting on. People are like, "What is it taking up all your time? Just put some microphones on stage and get a guitar." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I don't think you understand."
Right.
So the best I could do was a novella, but next year I think you should be getting Jonas's story, and that is what I envision as the final novel in the Sapphire Cove series, but possibly some more of these Sweet Secrets novellas.
Oh, there you
Love
go.
that.
There you
Yeah,
go.
Love that. Do you have time for some quick get to know you questions?
absolutely.
Okay. Well, can you name a movie that was better than the book?
Jaws.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Jaws is better than the book. I read the Jaws book when I was very young. Jaws spends, as one producer of the movie said, too much time on land. It's very dark. The marriage between Ellen Brody and his wife is bad. I think she has an affair with Hooper. It's just there's a lot of soap opera. So I usually love soap opera, but when there's a giant shark, I'm like, get to the shark. So yeah,
Yeah, right,
Jaws,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah. He's a land
Jaws.
shark, a lone shark.
Absolutely breaking up everybody's marriage,
All right, all right. Well, which fictional character would you most like to be friends with?
Friends with. Oh, that's a tough one. Which fictional character would I most like to be friends with? I have to say, I'm currently in my Knots Landing era, which is, 45 years a little late. I didn't watch it when I was a kid. I think it was on too late. It was on after my bedtime. But there was a scene where Donna Mills, Michelle Lee, and Joan Van Ark are driving. I posted about it on Threads. They're driving somewhere, and you can tell it's the 80s because no one's wearing a seatbelt, and there is a bench seat, and the three of them are sitting in the front comfortably. And I looked at it, I was like, I would go anywhere with those three women. I really would. I
Did
would
you ever see
watch
did you ever see
Abby.
the Carol Burnett satire of it?
Which one was that? Fresno?
Yeah. Where
Wasn't she
she
satirizing Falcon Crest though? She was the
Yeah, she
Raisin
was. She
Baron.
was. But I mean, it was
Yeah.
that whole kind of
Oh
dynasty
yeah.
Dallas, kind of thing. But I just
I
loved every time she
love
got in the
that.
back of that station wagon on the bench seat facing backwards.
I didn't notice that. That's really, I have to find it. I remember as a kid when it was on, and I remember not having enough. I love those soap operas so much. I was like, well, I don't want her making that old woman making fun of my soaps. But today I'm sure I would love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really, there's something about the performances of those three actresses that I think brings those characters to life. But yeah. So
Okay.
right now, that's this week.
Okay. Well, ours is anti-meme, which is right above his shoulder.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Roz, gotta have Roz. All right. So, what is the most fascinating fact that you know?
The most fascinating fact that I know. Well, and immediately I begin thinking of repulsive facts that are not fascinating,
Well,
like stuff that the kid in high school said to freak you out, like 60% of dust is human skin. Like that's the first thing, or that speech from the ice storm. Eric Jacquin always talks about it, where the kid gets up in class and says, "When you are smelling something, pieces of the thing are actually entering your nose and your." That's a
okay.
fascinating fact.
Okay. Now we're
Fascinating.
talking.
Yeah, I don't know. Fascinating. I'm trying fascinating,
No,
and
well,
it's
those
all
were
coming up
fascinating.
gross. Yeah,
All right. What was your favorite subject in school?
English. Absolutely, English. Coming
Okay.
and going.
Before making a telephone call, do you rehearse what you're going to say?
Absolutely, absolutely. I absolutely
Okay.
rehearse what I'm going to say.
All right. All right. Fair enough. What current event or causes are you most passionate about?
Oh God, there was restoration of American democracy.
Hmm?
I think I just it's such a. I'm so in despair about the state. I'm so stunned that who was reelected. I was that annoyingly optimistic friend,
Mhm.
among the Democrats who was like, "There's no way she's got it in the back." Blah blah blah. So I'm still reeling, to be frank, and so I think we need to not start to believe that our votes don't count, and I think turnout is key. I think that's what I'm most passionate about is assuring democratic turnout, voter
I,
turnout,
I have
whatever that takes.
I have to
Yeah.
say, yeah, I have to say that I'm right there with you. But my favorite, if we don't want to say he who shall not be named. We can call him what Jen and Ange over at I've Had It News podcast say. They call him Taco Tits.
Taco tits, yeah, works for me. Or TT for short.
Right, right. There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if
Yeah.
you could visit anywhere in the world right now, where would it be?
Right now. So the idea is I could visit anywhere in the world right now. That's a good question. I've been very blessed and I've been able to so I think immediately of places I haven't been yet that I want to see, and
Oh,
it's
there you go.
probably Scandinavia. It's Norway or Sweden, particularly Bergen in Norway or Stockholm. All those places I've seen on bleak, beautiful Scandinavian crime dramas on television.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my first love is Copenhagen, so
Yeah,
I'm right
never
there with
been.
you, right up there. Okay, who, if anyone, was your first celebrity crush?
I'm going to say the one that really stood out because it was coming into my own as a gay person was Scott Wolf. Scott
Oh,
Wolf
okay.
on Bailey on Party of Five. I just looked at him and it was like, you are no more bisexual than you are an egret. You are, you feel something for Scott Wolf you have never felt for any woman ever and never will. It was just, oh my God, he made me melt. Yeah.
All right, good to know. Well, finally, what is your personal favorite recipe that you make, and are you willing to share it with us?
I will. I leveled up my cooking game during the pandemic because I had to, and I don't have a grill. I live in a condo, and so I don't have an outdoor space or a grill. And there was, I can't remember where I saw it. There is a recipe for cooking a really thick piece of meat in an oven. And my broiler broke, right?
Oh,
Where you get an iron skillet, and this is like a New York steak, something that would normally be very hard. You sear it for about 3 to 5 minutes on both sides in the hot skillet. Then you put the entire skillet and piece of meat in the oven at 450 degrees for about 10 minutes, and it makes a perfect, very thick, medium piece of meat. And I'm pretty simple when it comes to the vegetable on the side, but being able to cook, I'm a total carnivore. No offense to anybody who
no, no, I'm right there with you.
and that changed my life because it works with it can work with pork chops, it can work with veal, it can work with other. It's about the thickness of the meat.
Yep, yep, I'm right there with you. All
Nice.
right, well, you made it through the list. Bravo.
Excellent.
Nicely done. So you talked about the end of life. You a party for your mom, the
Hmm.
celebration, and you're still on a promotion circuit for Party of
Yes.
Three. Is there
Yes.
anything else you want to announce for folks?
Well, I always love to talk about our podcast over at thedinnerpartyshow.com. I mentioned that, Eric Shaw Quinn and I had, I think since the last time we talked, we helped solve a murder, which was kind of amazing. We used our platform to generate leads around a long unsolved murder case here in Hollywood, the murder of Billy Newton. And the work that we did reached an empty nester, a former social worker named Clark Williams, who put all the pieces together and figured out who had killed him. And the LAPD was able to fly out and interview this person who was on death row in Oklahoma for a similar crime. I think not on death row, excuse me, life in prison as part of a plea agreement with the victim's family in Oklahoma. And Darylyn confessed to the murder. And it was an incredible thing because we just thought when we started, we're gonna try to get people as obsessed with this case as we have been, so that if it's not solved by the time we leave this earth, someone else will take up the charge. And instead, all of this activity and energy and people came together. And the LAPD officer, Detective John Lamberti, said to us, if you guys hadn't done your podcast, I would have shelved the case because I inherited it as part of a big binder of cold case files. And I Googled to see if there was anything on it, and there you guys were talking about it. And he came in and said that in our studio and completely tore us up. We were
So,
teary-eyed.
so your podcast will now be the next season of Only Murders in the Building.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. Absolutely.
Okay.
Although I have to say, I think the basics of this case were far more grim than anything on Only Murders in the Building. I haven't seen Only Murders in the Building.
Oh my gosh, you
I
have
know.
to.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
It's definitely got its queer angles.
Oh, good. Everything should have a queer angle.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So people should find that at thedinnerpartyshow.com.
Yes, thedinnerpartyshow.com or on any podcast platform. Christopher and Eric is the name of the podcast.
Love it. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Wear your rubbers. That's what everybody used to say to me if it was rainy out. No, my final words of wisdom are a Dolly Parton quote that somebody shared with us at the show recently. Find out who you are and do it on purpose.
Oh, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I always loved my dad's. Every time anybody was leaving, he's all, okay, goodbye, right when you find work.
Oh, all right, folks. We want to extend a huge thank you to Christopher Rice for taking time out of his schedule to come talk to us. Christopher, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back.
Been our pleasure. Listeners, you can find his summer reads, his beautiful romances under the name C. Travis Rice. Please go look them up. They're great. I have fallen into the series and I need this latest one to complete my collection. And we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our links, disclaimers, and all of our socials, go to www.ropodcast.com. Tune in next week for our queer media fix.
I'm glad you stumbled through that.
Yeah, me too.
That's a lot of you guys read way more official stuff than we do. We're like, yeah, our sound guy is Brandon and he didn't quit again this week. Thank God. All right, see ya.
Maybe I need to be funnier about it.
No, I think there's
that was pretty
legal.
funny.
I think you need to get that information out. I think we need to we need disclaimers. Oh God. You reminded me of all the oversight on our end. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so
back,
much.
Absolutely. I'll be back. Yeah, next year there'll be a big book. That's the plan. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having the whole series together on my shelf. So
excellent. Thank you.
And I'm going to go read Density of Souls again.
Oh, please do. I hope it holds up.
It does. It does.
Excellent.
All right. Well,
Bye,
enjoy
guys.
the rest of your interviews. Thank you again.
You too. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.